Good evening, Whakala Falahiatu, and welcome to tonight's bulletin of BCN News. Leading the news tonight, this morning, Premier Dalton Tangilangi held a press conference after the cabinet meeting. Here are some of the key decisions about the flight on Monday and the people in isolation right now as determined in cabinet today.
The key decision is that we encode Blue immediately, at the moment. If anything, it's also the expected incoming passengers for the next flight next Monday. There'll be no incoming passengers, but the plane, as per normal, for those that will be leaving here, but there'll be no incoming passengers for the next flight. We've taken all precautions this morning. The health team are undertaking tests of all those who came in on that flight, and we also have decided that they'll spend an extra 24 hours in managed isolation. So in other words, they won't be released until Monday midday while they undergo all these tests as of today.
I also asked the Premier whether a decision had been made to confirm the vaccination of children 12 to 15 years old on the island, given that yesterday New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced New Zealand will now vaccinate their 12 to 15-year-olds.
That will be decided very urgently next week. When the MedSafe in New Zealand, this was about a month ago, when they approved for those age group, we were going to kickstart then because we were advised we don't have to wait for New Zealand to agree on their 12 to 15-year-old. But as we heard as of yesterday that they have agreed. But again, we have to revert back to a little bit more advice from Colin. But we are fast-tracking that. They'll be part of the discussions next week.
Premier Tangilangi is now urging people on the island to please follow the hygiene advice from public health officials. Cabinet this morning also made updates to the newer emergency response plan for COVID-19.
I think everyone just needs to stay vigilant and look out for one another. We're taking all necessary steps to deal with such as the flight coming in next week, especially those handling cargo and all these things. So, and please follow them and adhere to some of the things from the health team, such as wash your hands and that. And also, I'd like to promote our using of the RockSafe app, because that can also help us identify if anything happens here, that we can also identify the movement of people. So that's very important as well. We will be also releasing our emergency response plan. That's got to be also will be translated in Niuean, and that can be made readily available, but also will be on the website for some of the people's understanding and what we are doing.
So recapping that information, we are now in alert level blue. The flight coming in on Monday next week will not be bringing in any passengers, and those currently in managed isolation quarantine will remain in isolation for an additional 24 hours and they will be released on Monday next week. Cabinet will update information with regards to the vaccination of children 12 to 15 years next week. And in our other news, the team of New Zealand government officials from the Ministry of Health, Customs and Immigration are into their second and last week of consultations and meetings with their local counterparts and stakeholders on the island. Here's more on that story.
Our visit here is really to support those agencies, bringing our experience from working with travel bubbles with Cook Islands, but also Australia, to share some of that and to help the teams prepare. So this is really part of a process, one step in many steps to get to a point where, we are confident that it's safe to open that sort of travel corridor. So there's still a bit of work to do, I think. And I think part of that is because Niue has been, without any COVID cases for a long time. Things have been really safe. that's testament to the work that's been happening. But as you've sort of seen in the last 24 hours, things can change quickly. So Niue has to be prepared in a similar way to be able to respond. And so that's why we're here, essentially to help the teams on the ground.
Dr. Va says that their consultations here has been to see where the Niue system needs the most support and where New Zealand may be able to provide that support. The team, accompanied by the New Zealand High Commissioner Helen Tana, yesterday met with the private sector, where issues over vaccination effectiveness was also raised by one of the very few unvaccinated people on the island. Here is Dr. Laupapa Va explaining about vaccines.
Vaccinations are a population level tool, and they're designed actually not just for the people that take the vaccine, they're designed for the people that cannot. And that means that, you know, Niue is in a really good situation, and depending on how the rollout goes for the younger age groups when that's allowed, if you can achieve a high enough vaccination rate, it actually won't matter too much if you don't have, you know, a small percentage that can't get vaccinated. And that's because everyone else is keeping those people safe. And there will be a group of people that just can't take the vaccine because of, you know, something to do with their immunity, and they might have a condition that prevents it. That's how vaccines work in general. It's not just the COVID vaccine, it's any vaccine that's been around since the beginning of time. And that's why it's so important. You don't want to sort of take the risk in terms of, you know, having a large proportion of people unvaccinated and potentially having to deal with more severe cases in a system that can't cope with a great number of severe cases. And as I said, we've seen that in populations that have been unvaccinated, potentially, more so than in vaccinated states. Again, something to really consider and a message to drive home.
One of the key tools used to prepare Niue for quarantine-free travel and to better respond to the pandemic is the use of the contact tracing app RockSafe. Alicia Hipa from the Health Department spoke about this at the meeting with the private sector because most of the local retailers on the island and stores located at the commercial centre, the petrol station, the bank and some government departments have the RockSafe terminals located there. Here is Dr. Va with more information about contact tracing.
When we think about contact tracing, you know, if there's a case identified, you would walk through, say, a case investigation. So someone needs to talk to the actual case to figure out who the contacts might be from that person. And then usually there's others that do the contact tracing. So they're obviously getting in touch with those contacts, finding out, you know, where they are, what they have to do. And there'll be also people that look at, you know, doing the daily checks for people that have been identified as contacts or a case for, you know, checking their general health, checking welfare, that sort of thing. That's usually what would happen.
He told BCN News that they have used some of the lessons they've learned over time and through activities such as conducting training and running through scenarios, which the team had been doing since last week. The team is expected to have some idea of readiness towards the end of next week when a report will be finalised for the leaders of both the Niue and New Zealand governments to decide. And the Chief Electoral Officer Darren Tovaka yesterday informed that 6 villages will go to the polls at the end of this month to elect their new village councils. However, in an unusual situation, Mr. Tovaka at the close of nominations last week informed that there were no nominations received for the village of Vaiea. In the official gazette, the Chief Electoral Officer Darren Tovaka said that the matter of the village of Vaiea not having any nominations for their village council has been reported to the clerk of the Niue Legislative Assembly as required by the Assembly Act of 1966. BCN News understands that the Clerk of Assembly, Cherie Morris Tefatu, is currently in New Zealand on personal leave. Meanwhile, the 6 villages going to the polls this year are Tamakautonga, Liku, Higutavake, Tuapa, Makefu and Alofi North. There were 2 withdrawals of candidate nominations, both from the Alofi South electorate with Brendan Pasisi and Gregory Harding, which leaves Alofi South the biggest electorate with only 4 councillors. So the following people have been declared duly elected by the Chief Electoral Officer. For the village of Alofi South, Robin Heko, Anthea Heko Harding, Olav Hekesi and Narita Viliamu. For the village of Avasele, Hetutu Tama Spido Hetutu, Taihia Hetutu, Emeline Laufoli, Jody Laufoli and Tifanga Tupuiliu. For Hakupu, Nise Marie Jackson, Pacific Enterprise Mautama, Patlin Silingi, Dempster Tomailunga and Itzi Tukuitonga. For the village of Lakapa, Tongariro Cornelio, Rhonda Siakia, Trevor Siakia, and Ezra Tungiamana. For the village of Mutalau, Florence Melekitama, Jean Pulefulau, Judy Tawafe, and Meleki Tawefasi. For Toi, Vikatolia Liumahetau, Manongi Poihanga, Poni Vasalia Taufitu, Paulino Tukimua, and Sapati Tuhanga. And for the village of Namukulu, Kilimana Hilingutu, Talaia Makaia, and Whanongalaia Sione Tuato. In the case of Vaiea, the electoral office is already preparing for a by-election for the village council of Vaiea, which will be held at a date to be determined and publicised after the village council elections on Friday the 27th of this month. A small gathering was held at Sir Robert's Wharf this afternoon to witness the handover of the new Biosecurity Agency's vessel from the New Zealand government. There to witness the event was the Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilangi, New Zealand's High Commissioner Her Excellency Helen Tana, and other dignitaries. The vessel, which is for Niue's border security agencies, arrived in Niue last year. The border security vessel was provided under the Hakili Matangi project run by Immigration New Zealand and funded by the New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Hakili Matangi provides immigration support to 7 Pacific Island countries, including Niue. According to Deputy New Zealand High Commissioner Nigel Eales, this program complements work done by other New Zealand law agencies in the region, including New Zealand Police and New Zealand Customs. Training of the multi-agency crew of the RHIB was organised through Pacific Maritime Safety Program run by Maritime New Zealand and the Niue Marine Department, who work with Ewan Barclay from Niue Blue to deliver elements of the New Zealand Coast Guard's Day Skipper and Marine VHF courses modified to Niue's needs. Ewan Barclay also worked with the crew to develop standard operating procedures and health and safety checks for the boat. Staff from Niue Immigration, Customs, Police, Biosecurity and Maritime have all contributed to getting the boat and its crew to the handover stage today. New Zealand's Deputy High Commissioner Nigel Eales spoke on behalf of the New Zealand Government and Hakili Matangi, the donor of the vessel.
This is an important part of the activity, I think, because the vessel is not just for one agency, it's for a range of agencies that help protect Niue's borders, and especially at this time of COVID, it's become very important and very clear that agencies have to work together and combine their efforts to keep Niue safe, not just from COVID, but also from those who seek to do other things as well, that might be a bit illegal, or even just obeying the rules around quarantine and customs and so forth. So this is truly a multi-agency investment for Niue, but also for New Zealand. Hakili Matangi has been the funder of this through its activity, but it also supports the work of Customs, New Zealand Customs in the region, New Zealand Police, biosecurity as well. So a range of New Zealand agencies benefit through this project as well. Also, I'd like to thank the Pacific Marine Safety Program run by Maritime New Zealand. They helped organise Evan here to do the safety, the training for the crew, and also the safety, occupational health and safety work around it. That means we can hand it over today.
Minister of Infrastructure and Finance, Honourable Crosley Tatui, accepted the vessel on behalf of the Niue government.
Firstly, thank you for the gift and for explaining to us the background of where we are today. It's a precious gift. I want to reflect many years ago when I was working in Treasury. They used to have a small aluminium dinghy with 2 paddles. But those days there were really 1 or 2 yachts that comes around the place. And for many years they rely on a dinghy vessel to provide the service. Thank you so much, team and New Zealand, for providing us this modern vessel to enable us to carry out the laws, the regulations, the policies of Niue, to fulfill the border security requirements globally and in the region.
The vessel and those who will drive and use it was blessed by Reverend Nevi Salatelu of the Alofi Ecclesia. And in sport, the Niue Football Association's 2021 seven-a-side football tournament held on Saturday last week attracted 23 teams from around the island. The tournament was and the soccer season was officially opened by Premier Tangilangi. The day started with the curtain raiser game by Niue Primary School children aged 6 to 8. With the teams Alofi versus Niue. There were 3 categories in the main tournament: the mixed juniors, open women's and open men's. In the mixed juniors category, a total of 8 teams competed, but Alofi 1 was just too strong, taking out first place, Hakupu Lakepa in second and Avasele in third. And in the open women's and open men's competitions, the village of Vaiea was just too good, winning the open women's and winning the open men's competitions. So for the open women's category, 5 teams competed, Vaiea taking out first place, second Alofi and Tuapa 1 in third. For the open men's category, first Vaiea 1, second Vaiea 2 and in third place Mutalau. And also from last Saturday at the top 16 female darts tournament, where it came down to the final between retired nurse Palahimoka Kalauni and young Ina Talaisi from Vaiea. But Mrs. Kalauni from Hakupu was just too good, taking out the title as the island's top female darts player this year. Congratulations to both Palahe and Ina. The picture provided here is from Linda Tomailunga. And that's our news for tonight. Please do go over to the beautiful village of Tamakautonga on Saturday. Join their people and support the village at their annual show day. And remember, we are in alert level blue in the COVID-19 alert levels. So do wash your hands frequently, refrain from hugging and kissing, and do use the RockSafe app at places around the island where they are located. Have a lovely weekend. Good night.